Up, D?
You look great.
You look fantastic.
I got a soft light on me to
Yeah.
hide my age spots and my
Oh,
wrinkles
you
and all
look
those
great.
things.
All right, D, just ask him. Walt, introduce yourself.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Name is Walt Prosser, Walter L. Prosser. I'm 75, or will be in about a month. I was in the military, was in the Air Force, U.S. Air Force at that time. And I flew, and I ended up flying test aircraft in the Florida area, and test apparatus on aircraft, not new aircraft as we think of a test pilot flying new aircraft. These were apparatuses that were attached to aircraft to change the aircraft, what they did for the military, like cannons in the nose and like that. It was in Florida, and then I was going to stay in service and decided to make a career out of it. And then finally, later in the late 40's, I was told that to stay in the service I was going to have to fly a desk, as they called it, in Germany. At that time there was the airlift going on. And I decided that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to done, so I came into private, came out of service, but stayed in the military, stayed in service as a reserve pilot, and flew out of reserve bases here in the Midwest. And still flew and still fly today. But this happened, this particular incident happened, I believe it was in the late 40's. It was when all of this thing was going on about extraterrestrial flying saucers and the like of that. We had some incidences that were publicized of pilots seeing things and aircraft going down, triangle, you remember, well, I certainly remember that, where we lost 6 TBMs, or the TBFs. At 75, you forget a few things, the details. They lost them in the Bermuda Triangle and other places. Strange things happen. And the military and we in the Fly Corps were very concerned about those things. So I was flying, and I was flying out of Midwest reserve base, and we was a weekend type of thing, and then 2 weeks during the summer, typical of reserve at that time, and continued to fly different aircraft, as I flew a lot of different aircraft while I was in service, being in testing. And so it was not unusual for me. But on this particular occasion, we were, I think it was on our 2-week encampment, it was called. And we were, and by the way, at that time, I would still thought that I might continue on in service because there was some things going over in Korea and the like of that, and I still thought I might go back into service and fly. And so I believe that those people that were involved in that, pilots, were probably people that the higher command felt were going to make careers, and they should probably be aware of what's going on. That's the way I analyzed it after I saw and experienced what I experienced that particular day. So at this particular time, they requested we all come into, I'd forgotten, it was a hangar. It wasn't a hangar, it was an auditorium or something there on the air base. And as we came in, we made a statement and swore that we would not divulge the information that we were to receive here to anybody, including our immediate family. And as those who were in the service in World War II, you make a commitment in going into service, and at a young age of age 19, 20, you are very cognizant of that, and you live by that, and the military live by making a commitment. And so they asked that we not say anything. So I felt that it was a commute, and we all felt that way, that we would abide by the rules as we always had during our active career in the military. And remember, that had only been a year or two that I had, at that time, probably not even a year that I had been off active duty. In fact, I know it was less than a year, probably only months. So I felt that was a strong commitment, and I almost continue to feel that way today, although no one has ever approached me since that time about that, nor have I talked to anybody else about it, because of the commitment that I made. And the first time I've talked to anybody other than my immediate family. In fact, it was so bizarre that I didn't want to be people that look at me and think, "You're crazy, this doesn't happen." Well, it did happen, at least as I remember it happened to me. But I put it out of my mind for many years and talked about it not at all, not even family gatherings necessarily, and don't even today, until I was asked to do this that we're doing now for posterity, so that there is some recordings of those people who did witness some of this. So we were herded into, and not herded, we were at that time generally first lieutenants, captains, majors, this rank, and all flying people, and just flying officers, and as I recall, and so we were in here. We had I forgot the rank. Some military Air Force person was there and started giving us a briefing of what we were going to see. We were not to talk about, as we had noted and signed when we came in the door, and it was all black curtained out and the like of that. And they had a display table there, I remember. And there were some odd-looking pieces of metal there and some other artifacts. I can't remember everything that was there, but I do remember some pieces that looked like metal. And then they had some, and I hope this is right, I saw some strange things in big glass containers. And at the time, I believe, when we went in, I would imagine they recovered until they started giving us, I say they, this particular fellow, I think there were two of them, giving us this indoctrination. And so they gave us a little background of some of the things that some pilots had run across, and what to do if it happened to us, and speculated that this would probably continue to occur, and maybe even there would be some personal contact with aliens if in fact that's what that was. And they certainly felt that it was, or they wouldn't be talking with us as they did that way. So as this went on, and I think it went on for an hour probably, and I don't remember exactly, but again, the details escape me, and I'm sorry that I didn't do this 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But when they unveiled, and I believe that's the way they unveiled the things on this table, it was laid out along here, and we were all rounded in, and there was only a small cadre of us there. I would judge there were only 40 people, maybe pilots, something like that, and that plus or minus 20, I don't know, something like that. And so they unveiled these things a little bit at a time and talked about them. This was, there had been an accident from a spacecraft of some kind, someplace. I don't remember, it was out in the mountainous country, I believe. I can't remember exactly where it was now, but it all tied in with what we had heard and what we had been reading about and hearing on the news and like that, and reading in the newspapers. It all tied in with that, and it made it very real to us, very real to us, that this was happening, that these things have occurred and will continue to occur and will become more profound, and to expect this, and this is what we might encounter, but they weren't sure that that's what it was. They simply wanted us to be prepared. So again, what we saw was these pieces of, I can barely see them, they're very shiny metal. And my later years, I became somewhat of a metallurgist in my business of engineering, and I still remember those pieces, and they didn't look like the metal of stainless steel or chromoly or chromium or aluminum that we see today and that I've known in my business life. They looked like something like that, but something different, and they were, I don't remember being bent. They were kind of jagged. They were, I don't remember exactly, but they were like that, different. And then how did they do that? Maybe they had a cloth and they opened these. I think it seemed like there was 3, or was there 4, or was there just 1? They were big glass jugs, and kind of like I think of my wife's. She has my daughter have big glass chimneys like where they sit them down over flowers or something. They were kind of like that, but they were liquids in them, and there were pieces of humans in them, or were they human? They were, I can't remember what they looked like, but I'm afraid over the years that what I've seen and heard and watched, and I've always been an advocate of this, that there is something out there, space, and they know we're here and all this kind of thing, because of that experience. And being in the Air Force, you feel that as well. So maybe over the years has tainted my memory on what these bodies look like, and I think of them as a bigger head and smaller bodies, and maybe again my memory has been tainted as a result of that. But that's the way I remember them. They were small, and they were whole. I mean, not a hand, and they had limbs, and I don't recall hair, and I recall eyes, big eyes. But again, I use the word tainted, maybe that's it, from what I've seen. But it occurs to me even now that that's what I saw, and it was spooky. But remember, at 21, 22 years old, we were fearless. Nothing really scared us. We take a crazy airplane out and fly it and do crazy things and not worry about dying and somebody hurting you. We were command of ourselves and everything else. We were hot guys, sharp pilots. So today it would scare the hell out of me, but at that time it wasn't that big. It was a big deal, because here was some actual facts in front of us that really this did occur, and something was out there, and to be prepared for it. And it might look like this, that is, these figures. And did they tell us where it was? It seemed to me it was in a desert someplace, that this thing had crashed, and they had removed these bodies and these pieces of metal, and it's all that was left of it, or at least that part of it. And I had the impression, I just thought of this, I had the impression that they were doing this throughout the whole of the Air Force, throughout the whole country, throughout the whole world, I suppose, at the air bases. Although it seemed to me that it was happening more in the United States than any place else. And that they maybe had other artifacts, they're not artifacts, maybe they had other pieces of this mystery, maybe other bodies, other pieces of metal that they were showing at other air bases, other places. It seemed to me that we were not alone in that. That is, our 30, 40 people or whatever, that it was going on through it. And again, for some reason, it seems to me that we were being indoctrinated in this because we were possibly the future Air Force generals and administrative people and whatever it was. And a lot of the fellas did. In fact, one of them became 4-star general or 3-star general that I knew, continued to know. And we didn't even talk about that. He was kind of aroused. We never even talked about this, but anyhow. And so on. As I said, I was there about an hour, I think, maybe it was 2 hours, I don't know. And the details really escape me now. I felt it was real. I was very attuned to being secret about it, not to tell anybody. I didn't say this to my wife until I was long discharged from the service, and I think it probably was 10 years or maybe after that. And she said, "Oh, you're making this up." And my children weren't even long enough to tell at that time. And I suppose maybe her saying that maybe refrain from talking about to anybody else, because I don't even know today that she believes this, and I probably wouldn't blame her. It's a crazy thing that happened, but it did happen, and I know it didn't happen just to me. And why me? Because I never ended up in the Air Force, and I wasn't that big a factor in the Air Force, other than I probably was the right age and had the right background and the right mentality and the right education to go farther in the Air Force. I chose not to, of course. And maybe that's why I was chosen along with a lot of other people. And that reminds me, yes, something else as I talk. There were some other Air Force people there that were in attendance as I was to see this and to witness this that were not from our base. So they did bring some other people. I remember they must have brought some other people from some other bases, or maybe from some other facility to see this. So we weren't alone. And again, to reiterate that I felt that this was happening throughout the whole Air Force, all over the world, the bases. And this was happening at the time when this was a big deal. We'd see in the newscasts and the newspaper. At that time we had no television, of course. And so it was not an unusual thing. I felt it was the right thing, that we should know about this, that it was going to happen to us, and so it wasn't something, it was unusual, but it was something startling. And I wish I could remember more. I wish it was earlier that I would have talked about this. And for those people who see this in the future, this is the best I can remember. It did happen to me and to a lot of other people, and I feel that sometime, possibly after my lifetime, but sometime there will be verification of this, that this did happen. I believe that someplace it's in the archives of the Air Force, wherever that might be. I certainly was not alone, and other people saw this, as I continue to say. And hopefully some of them, their memory will be better than mine, and hopefully somebody will have documented their experiences we have here. That's about all I can remember. Okay. And
it's great.
I'll have to end it at that.
Okay, well, is it okay if I ask you a couple
Please
questions?
do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you were brought to this base, where was the base? Do you remember?
It was in southern Indiana.
You don't remember the...
Well, I do, but I prefer not to say that.
Okay.
There's a reason for that, but it was in southern central Indiana. That should be sufficient.
Okay, and the reason you're not comfortable saying it is because
there's other people involved there, and if someone were to divulge it, then I would say so. But because they're not, I would not say so. It was at well-known Reserve Air Force Base, southern part of Indiana. It was there because it was close to my home, which is in the Indianapolis area.
Okay. And before you guys were brought into this, you were you had to sign papers.
As I recall, as we came in the door, I remember coming in, it seemed to me there was a black curtain that we came through that blanked out all light. And now that I think that, why was that? At the time it seemed logical. Like you're blocking out the light for film, to make a film or something, but there was no filming done. But we came, it seemed to me it was a black, and we signed something when we came in, and took an oath, as we would take oaths quite often in the Air Force, or something we were going to do or whatever, and we'd always sign papers in the Air Force. It wasn't that big a deal. But I believe after what we saw, I can understand why. And it would continue, as I recall, the officer, and he was a higher ranking officer, that continued to emphasize the secrecy of this, that we were a chosen few, and to not spread this along. And he felt that we would be protective of that, as I believe that we were.
Mm-hmm. And when you guys were outside of this hall before you went into this hangar, whatever, what did you think? What were they going to tell us? You know, was this unusual?
No, it was not unusual. We would have from time to time special things come in on people come in and talk about maybe an accident happened and it was a faulty something in an airplane that we flew, and this is what to do in case this happens. If this airplane gets into a spin or it doesn't, that's, well, whatever. This is how to react to that. Or indoctrination on many things at that time. Well, not unusual at all that we would have this. The unusual part was what we saw and what they told us.
When you went into this room and there's tables set out, was there one or two guys doing the...
It seemed to me there was one main fellow, but it seemed to me there was more than one. In fact, boy, I'm really searching this terrible recall of mine now. It seemed to me probably there was one officer of a higher rank, like maybe a junior colonel or a bird colonel, maybe something like that. Could have been a captain, but lots of us were captains at that time. But maybe not. But it also, I think maybe enlisted man or so was there to aid in this. Maybe move something around or set the tables up. Maybe it was that. But it was a very small cadre of people.
Mm-hmm. And you said that one of these people within the group went on to be a three-star.
Well, no, it was not in our group, but a friend, in fact, somewhat a relative of mine, went on. But, well, I'm sorry. No, he was not in the Air Force at that time. But, in fact, I got him involved in joining the Air Force, and he ended up to being a three-star general. But we never talked about this. I would certainly believe that he was aware of this, being that was in SAC, being that he was aware of this, but we never talked about it. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the reason I'd thought about it, I'm sure I thought about it because I'm sure that I thought I've made a commitment, I've sworn I wouldn't talk, and it would be poor to talk with a fellow officer who I don't know that knows this, you know, so mm-hmm. I'm sure that's why I didn't talk with him about it.
And any of these other people that were in this group that saw what you saw, do you know any of them today? Or?
I do not. Mm-hmm. I was not necessarily close to any of those down there. At least if I was at the time, we had different well, I shouldn't say backgrounds, we were all pilots, but we spread around, and we weren't all from this area. We were throughout the whole Midwest that would come into this area for this for our reserve training and reserve flying and in Air Force Reserve. I did not stay close to any of those people, unfortunately.
And never came across them in the years past?
No, I never have.
Mm-hmm. When you came in and this table, they showed you these materials, this unusual metal. Did they allow you to handle this stuff?
I recall that we did. I recall that we did, and now that back into, and I was many years ago when I became somewhat of a metallurgist in the engineering business, which was my avocation, I recall thinking about that and the metals that we were using at that time, aluminum, stainless steel, nickels, alloys, and various metals. I would think about that. This is not the same metal that I'm sure I felt it there, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was different.
Hmm. And when they uncovered these containers that had what you think were, did they explain these are
as I recall, yes, these were the figures that were in the spacecraft that crashed, and I believe it was called. I think they called it a spacecraft. These were the bodies they recovered. I believe that's probably the way they explained that, and they had kept them in this liquid. I suppose it's formaldehyde or whatever they had. They kept these, and they may have run tests on them. I don't know. Those details I don't remember.
And did you get close to these canisters to look at these things close up?
Really searching my memory. We were close to the tables because touched, I believe, and I felt the metal. These containers were on the same tables, or were they to one side? The middle on the other side. There was a podium like where the officer stood, and then there was a table on either side of him. I don't recall. You know, it seemed to me that I don't think we got right up to them, but yet did we? It was enough that what I saw was startling. They were human type features. They had limbs and they had a head, but I don't recall any hair. And I recall that they were of a different proportion than our bodies were, and they were small. These containers were maybe 3 feet, 4 feet high, or something like this. And they weren't standing, or were they standing? I don't remember. But they were something in there that...
Were they dressed? Are they naked?
No, they weren't. There was no clothing on. No. It's a good question. No, there was no clothing, and they were very pale, but my God, a dead person is pale, so that was not unusual, not startling to see that.
Did you notice anything unusual about the hands, fingers, anything?
I'm afraid if I said I did, I would be echoing maybe what I've seen on television, and I don't want to jeopardize what I think I saw with what I may not have seen. I can't tell you that.
Mm-hmm. With your reaction to seeing materials and then all of a sudden being exposed to these possible alien beings from another world, was it just overwhelming to you? I mean...
Yeah, it was overwhelming, but I must tell you it was not scary. But it was that's the term maybe I've been reaching for. It was overwhelming. And today it is still overwhelming as I think about it. Maybe more so now than then, because remember at 20 or 22 years old, you know, you could kill the world. We were indestructible. And nothing fazed us. It did, but we didn't allow it to faze us. So, yeah, it was overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. And when you were in this
But
room...
it was very believable. I can't believe that they would have gone to this trouble if it hadn't been... this would have been crazy to do this for a lark, you know. In fact, I think... No, it didn't happen.
What was the reaction of the rest of the guys around you, and did you talk about it while you were in the room?
I'm sure we did, and I'm sure we talked about it afterwards, or did we? Maybe we didn't. In fact, no. I'm sure that when we left that room, yes, I almost remember that almost verbatim. When we left that room, you are not to speak to anybody, even your closest friend, about this. The person was sitting next to you in this room. You're not to speak to anybody about this. Yes, I'm sure. I remember. I'm just sure I remember that now. And I'm sure there was very little conversation between us in the room, because it was just that setting. It was not a setting, a feeling of camaraderie. It was an awesome thing that we saw, and an awesome possibility that we might see in the future and be confronted with in the future. And this was a training exercise for us to be prepared for that situation should it occur.
Were they telling you basically that if you come across these things in the air, not to attack them, or what was the purpose? Why did they want you to know this?
I believe that every incident to that point that would describe to us, there were several incidents described to us. One of them are those TBMs that went down the Triangle Navy. And but every incident was somewhat different. So they were giving us, I believe, the psychology that was to give us all the information they had and how these things occurred and what was the result of them, and what was heard over radio communication, and what the pilots did to give us a broad range of what we might experience. And I'm sure they said, don't do this, don't do that, but I think I had the feeling, and it all comes back to me slowly, but maybe, and I hope that this is right, I had the feeling that they felt that we were of such a quality of personnel at that time that we could decipher this with their help and what they've told us, and use our own judgment in how to react, but not to. We were never to be hostile at all. Never, never. And I remember that. We were never to be hostile, and I'm sure to try to make contact. And I don't recall how we were to make contact, but unless they gave us any instruction on that. The whole thing was to acquaint us with what was happening, what had happened, and what may happen, and to be prepared for it, and then to profoundly not create a situation, not become hostile. I think that was maybe the whole ball of wax of the whole thing, that it was true, these were happening, be prepared, here's what's happened, handle it in the most appropriate way at the time, and these were not their words, but again, very profoundly not to be hostile, and it was an awesome experience.
So above all, don't fire on these things. But you said, how else would you handle it? I mean, did they want you to report back about it?
Oh well, obviously, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, we're collecting all this data, and that's what they had brought to us. The data that had been collected. Obviously, yes. I don't recall about that mention, but that would obviously would have had to be the reason we're there. Mm-hmm. To expect it, to not be surprised if it happened, let's say, not to necessarily expect it, but not be surprised if it happened, but certainly if it did happen, to immediately report back and in full detail, to get all the detail you can and that sort of thing.
Did they also connect the squadron that was lost over the Bermuda Triangle to this?
Well, it was one of the happenings that took place, and there were many. I said a few. There were, what's a few? There were more than just 3 or 4 happenings, and I can't recall. I just remember the Bermuda Triangle because I think it was 5 or 6 TBMs that went down there, and they finally recovered them in the sea bottom later. I think I heard that. But there were a lot of happenings at that time. If you look back in the history, I think you'll find at that time when it was really prevalent that these flying saucers, these UFOs, were there, and it was right after the war. Right at the end of that, within a matter of a few years thereafter, when it was heavy.
Had you really thought much about this whole area before this thing?
I can't tell you that necessarily. I suppose we had. It certainly was on the news all the time, and it was generally Air Force people that were involved. So I suppose we had thought about that and talked about that, but I don't remember that really happened. Probably did.
And did you believe in this stuff?
Oh, I believed in it. Yeah, real quick. I had believed in it before, and that's probably what made it a little easier. I believed in it before that. I didn't mistrust the service. They'd been told us. I thought the right things. It certainly told me a lot of right things about aircraft I was flying and things I was doing with the aircraft, and had been factual about it and honest about it. So why would I? This is my father. He's the Air Force, and he's telling me things, so I believe him. So no, I never disbelieved it happened, and I felt it was going on before I ever saw this. So it wasn't strange to me, but it was awesome.
And with the idea of this. Was there any point over the years that you thought, well, maybe the military was just testing us, seeing what our reactions would be, and by seeing the reactions on these top people, maybe we get an idea of how society will handle it, and it was just all a big charade?
Never thought of it that way, Kevin. Never thought of it that way. It never occurred to me. I felt, as I said at the outset, that they had figured we were going to be the Air Force of the future, and we should know these things. Never occurred to me in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
At least that never occurred to me.
But what do you think about it now? I mean, the idea that it could just be a Showtime Hollywood production to see how you guys would react.
Now? What do you mean now? What?
Well, now after the years ago, or I just presented the idea of saying, you know, maybe they just wanted to get a bunch of young pilots together or upper military men and just see how they would react to this being presented with these things. If you know, psychology.
No, I know what you're saying, but again, I must say it didn't occur to me that that was the way. Remember, we were military, we were dedicated, we were obligated, and we wanted to be. We were hotshots. You know, we wasn't to be. We were in the military because we didn't want to. We volunteered. We volunteered to become pilots, but you volunteered to be a test pilot. No, that never occurred to me. I don't believe that was the case. Of course, it could have been, but if it is, they fooled an awful lot of people out in the Air Force that saw these things. I can't believe they would have doctored this thing up. Why would they do that? Not at that time. You know, they'd had to go through a lot of trouble. And what the heck, what would be the value of such a thing? Why all the secrecy? Why the obligation to not talk to even your fellow airmen as you walk out the door? And I'm sure that's what they told us. No. And today, I've wondered so many years why something more hasn't happened. The sightings have fallen off till there's nothing like it used to be back then. Why did it occur then and hasn't occurred since to any degree? I don't think it's because the military has covered it up. I'm sure they have, and I can see now why they would have. I really don't believe now that the public could handle this thing. I don't think at that time, it didn't occur to me at that time. I wondered, why in the heck why don't they tell it? But now that I'm older, and over the years, I thought the public couldn't handle this. My wife, my family, people, if you weren't in the military, even you couldn't handle this now. It was spread out the country, it's like it's Armageddon, this kind of thing. But we could. We were that kind of people at that time. People today that are 20, 21, 22 years old and are not at all like the people we were at that time. I mean, we were people that had the experience of 50-year-olds and that kind of thing. And no, the public couldn't. I don't believe we ever handled this. It would have been a disaster, I think. But why hasn't it happened since that time? I still believe there's something out there. I believe in what I saw. It hasn't gone away, but in much detail it has gone away. But sometime, I hope sooner than later, I believe that all this will be verified and those of us like to be vindicated that this really did happen. But why it hasn't happened till now, and it's, I don't know, maybe it comes in millenniums that it reoccurs from wherever it comes in outer space. There's got to be other, what do you call them, human beings, not in the term, not that we know as a human being, but there's got to be other life form there in some manner. I believe this was that life form from someplace in our huge galaxy of stars or wherever it might be in this whole galaxy. I mean, I believe that we are the head of a pin, and everything that goes on, and even smaller than that throughout, and has gone on for millions of years. I mean, billions of years, this thing. And we can't be alone in this thing, and this is the way I feel, and I've learned to feel after this happened. And that's my story.
Before they presented you with this, before you even walked into this situation where they walked into this hangar and explained all this stuff, what was you said you heard about these things. Well, did you hear about them from the newspaper, and what was your feelings about them at that time? You said that you believed.
Well, newspaper, yes, but also we'd have bulletins. If there was anything, a crash or whatever, in the Air Force, at least within the continental United States, the Air Force, or any of an unusual happening, we'd get a notice on it, a bulletin on it, be on a bulletin board. We learned about that before it was ever hit the newspapers or anything like that. So we were cognizant of this. That it was not new to us that this was happening. I'm sure it was the first time we'd heard it. My God, what's this going on? I don't want to run across something like this. Well, that had been, a year or 2 or 3 years beforehand. So it was not new. We heard about it from from the news media, but more particularly from bulletins.
And these bulletins would, so it had to obviously be unusual, because if they said that they made it sound like, in these news bulletins, that there were these unidentified flying objects that caused this wreck, or it was suspicious because these things were around the area. When you're presented with bulletins, and you said it was unusual, then meaning that they were explaining some of this UFO.
It was not unusual to have bulletins. It was a thing of the day. We had bulletins all the time on many things. A change in an aircraft, a specification in an aircraft, or it could be anything. It could be, what kind of underwear you're supposed to be wearing, that kind of bulletins. And the bulletins would not give you the detail we saw in that room. They would simply say, hey, we've had some strange happenings, and this airplane saw something or whatever, like this. And it was the same thing was in the newspapers. That's how we heard that. Bulletins were open publication. There was no secrecy there. It was we got it first generally before the news got it, but there was no secrecy there. So no.
So in these news bulletins, they would actually say, a pilot in North Carolina was up flying, one of our Air Force guys, and he saw this silver disc or whatever. Would that be?
Yeah, that would be the. I would say, that something like that would be on a bulletin, that a B-17 ran across this strange thing in the sky over Arizona or whatever, and reported it to base, and they're investigating it, this kind of thing. Yeah, but no detail. Any more than the newspapers would have.
And as a pilot, were you ever told if you come across, see something in there, you're not supposed to tell the media, you keep it hush-hush, don't talk about it? Was there any kind of warnings for pilots that are up there and may see something that they think is a UFO?
I'm sure they did. That if this happens, that we may have a confrontation, or at least a sighting, or some indication that there's something there that we're not aware of, that we are to immediately come back to base and report it to intelligence there. We did that anyhow. I'm sure that was part of the scheme here.
In the form that they had you sign, what kind of form is it?
I don't remember. I do recall we signed something when we went in. I would assume, and at the time we went in and we signed it, that was not all that unusual. Maybe it was like an attendance record, but I'm sure after experiencing this, that it was not an attendance record. And I reflect back on what was it that we signed. I don't remember, but we signed something. And it didn't occur to me until after this awesome thing happened, that maybe we did. Maybe that was the philosophy of it, that we did sign something, and so, we're obligated by the laws of the military not to divulge this. Maybe that was part of their scheme of that, I don't know. But certainly, it's worked with me, because I didn't talk about it.
And what are the laws of the military?
Oh, I don't know now, Kevin, but, you're subject to court-martial if you disobey the laws of the military, not only in the Air Force, but even today in anything else, right? A court-martial is not the thing that you want to go through.
What does a court-martial entitle?
Well,
you'd be thrown in prison?
Yeah,
what?
all the bad stuff. Yeah, like a criminal, more than a felony. Sure, dishonorable discharge, all your pension is knocked away, and you're a dishonorable discharge, and that's like you're a criminal. You're out of prison, and you could go to prison. But honest people don't think about details of that. That's only the criminal element that know about those things. We don't know about that. I don't know about them even today.
Years later, when you decided that you were going to explain this event in your life to your family, how did you come about that, and what was their reaction?
Well, I told you it was my wife, and I don't remember now. If she were here, she could probably remember it better than I, because she said, "Oh yes, I've heard that story from you." I suppose I said, "Hey, there's something on my mind that I've kept from you for a number of years here that I think you should know about." And understand, my wife does not believe in science per se or this kind of thing. She isn't that kind of a person. She's a housewife and a mother and that kind of a thing. And so, and not small wonder that she would believe any of this, even though it's from me. She knows I'm not. I'm a very honest person, and but I joke with her a lot. And she since has said, "Well, I believe that you saw what you saw, but I wonder if it really was really what you saw, you know, or something like." I don't recall, but she just didn't believe it when I told her.
What about the rest of your family?
Well, I didn't tell in the rest. I told it my son and my daughter, but this was after 30 years or something like that. And oh yeah, my son was very attuned to that, all the details. And I have so many stories after 75 years and being involved in so many things. I've had so many different things I've been involved in my life. Just, I don't think anybody's had any more different, and you know that. And I have stories for almost everything. It would take a book that thick to all the stories that I have. And so my kids love to hear stories. And as most people do of the age that were not in the war, not during that period, because it's an entirely different mentality during the war. Read Citizen Soldier. I mentioned that to you earlier by Steve Ambrose. Everybody should read that, because that's very true on what we were back in those 1940s.
Why is it now that you signed that paperwork? It still is in effect. Why are you talking about this now on camera?
Because you've asked me to, and that I believe at this time 50 years, 50 plus 50 years. I don't want to say 50 years. It's never come out, and no one's ever military. When I went out of the military, they didn't say did you divulge what you learned in the military? That wasn't presented me. That's just one of the many things. It's never brought up again. Military never brought it up. While I was still in the service, as I went out of the service, at any time I've ever heard of it again. And so I'm thinking, my God, there's got to be an awful lot of people that know this in the military that are current with military. So, what the heck, And I'm at this age, so what can you do to me? I might have a squad of MPs out here one of these days with long rifles or something. I don't know, but it depends on what you do with this thing. This is just for posterity.
You think it's important then that this be recorded?
No, I think it's important to you and to the people who believe in extraterrestrial. I believe it's important to them, but it's not important to me now. At the time I felt it was, because I felt that somehow I was involved with, and I would be involved. It turned out that I was not, never have been. I would have loved to have seen something, never have. So at this point in my life, it doesn't really matter.
And as far as all your buddies and people that flew you knew the other pilots and stuff, did you know of anyone else in all your time in doing the flying the planes? Did anyone came across or saw anything in the sky that you knew of?
I'd like to say no, but I'm afraid to say yes, because I'm hope that these years have tainted my memory. It seems to me that in talking with Air Force people over the years, that there have, and it has been mentioned that by others, but I can't recall when what it was. It was certainly well after the particular period that what this subject is about, and so it wasn't that big a deal. In fact, just recently I go to air shows, and there's a lot of World War II aircraft on display at these air shows, and I don't know if I ought to say this or not, because I don't know how true it is, but I see these guys and we talk, and we're the same age, flew the same airplanes. I don't necessarily know them, but we have a thing between us because we were Air Force, and the same Air Force at that time, flew the same kind of airplane, so we have a good camaraderie. And I'm sure at sometimes I would have said over these several years, many years of these experiences at air shows and with old Air Force people, I said, do you recall is ever anything about the UFOs or whatever back in that period? And I'm sure somebody said, oh yeah, we have. What do you think about it? Oh, well, I think they're out there. It's been probably that. It's been casual. But I don't remember in any particular incident. I'm sure we would have talked about that.
Okay. I can't think of anything else, Walt.
Okay, Kevin, good luck, and to those who see this, I hope they will get something from it. I believe that sometime in the future that this will be verified, and those of us who say this story will be vindicated, and that it will be I hope that it will be a peaceful coexistence when that takes place. I would like to be around if that happens, but it better happen pretty soon because I'm 75. I only have 25 more years to live, and then I hope within that time it has.
What is your feeling of why these things would be coming here? I mean, what do you think's going on, or why would they be showing up?
Kevin, I have no idea. I would think it's like we are. We're all, human beings are explorers. We're always trying something new. And I think certainly we are explorers, or we wouldn't be going to Mars and the moon and all that sort of thing. I believe that somebody else, if there's other human beings, not human beings, if there's life form, they have to explore as well. I mean, that's the natural thing to do, is to explore. If we didn't explore, we wouldn't be here today, So I believe so. I believe it's all exploration to find out. And I think there's a sufficient difference in the life forms between ours, we call our body, and our as a human being, and that life form, that the matter of communication has not been addressed yet to make that connection. But I'm certain, I know we try it, I read about it, I know we're trying all the time to make, if there is anything out there to make connection, but it hasn't happened. At least if it's happened, it's not, we as the public are not aware of it.
This technology that you think that what was left of this flying saucer, or whatever it was that they showed you, do you think it was the technology was way above anything that was on the Earth at that time?
Well, that hardly goes without saying. I believe it was from what we heard about how fast they move, start and stop, land at no speed, and the shape of them, and yeah, of course.
So they give you details about the characteristics?
No, that's what I don't remember. There were details. I'm sure there were details, but the presentation was so awesome. I'm sure that's part of why I don't remember this. And I put it out of my mind for so many years that I don't remember those details. Although I must admit that I don't remember a lot of things that happened more recently than later. But anyhow.
And as far as the government, why do you think that they're not coming forward or letting this information out?
I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe it's the same philosophy that I felt when they did divulge this to us, that we couldn't handle it. And I think, as I said before, I think at that time the public could not have handled it. And I don't know about today.
It's interesting that you say today that you still don't feel like people can handle it.
I wouldn't say that. I don't think they could handle what I saw. I don't believe so. I think it would. Oh yeah, we could handle it, but I think it would be so awesome. I don't know. Often wonder what they did with those things, those containers, that metal, and when it's someplace in the archives of Washington, probably stored away in boxes and in the archives, Wright-Patterson, or who knows where.
Why would you say Wright-Patterson?
Oh, this was the head of the Air Force when I was in the Air Force, and Wright-Patterson was, well, it was the headquarters at that time. Now, of course, it's, I don't know where it is now, quite frankly.
Did they describe that besides the disc, there were other type of, besides the traditional disc that you might see, or was it just, do you remember?
I don't understand that.
That there was more than, instead of just seeing the traditional flying saucers, maybe there was something that was more like, shaped like a torpedo, instead of being this, you know, traditional.
I'm sure that was described, Kevin, but if it were different than the saucer that we've become accustomed, we've associated with this, I really think I would have remembered it. So I would have to say that it probably was that shape, and I can't verify that.
Okay, thank you, Walt.
Okay, good. To test different things, and we'd tear the aircraft up, or they weren't really good for combat after that, and so we had those to test different things. So I put it on, so people would ask me, so I put it on the wall out there in my workshop so people could
Check it out.
see that's what that was.
So Walt, did you guys have like reunions and stuff, you know, where you?
We have, well, you're in many different organizations. I have one that I've stayed with that we still have every